So, I'm going to talk about love letters a little bit before I give you this scrumptious idea, which is why you would even want to write a love letter. First of all, love letters is the male equivalent of a woman being like and looking like a Victoria's Secret model or Beyonce or Sofia Vergara. There is that kind of immense. There's even a saying: "Women wear makeup and men lie." Not that that's the exact same thing, but that those are the things shallowly that we value sometimes, which is looks and what is said. Of course, actions and character come later, but that's the saying. And so yeah, that's the saying. But that's only one of the reasons why I think love letters are really important. I think love letters don't always have to be sent. You're like, why would I write them? To keep it in mind. I think I'm not qualified, but I've heard qualified people talk about the fact that taking people for granted is one of the biggest issues. A divorce lawyer, the famous one, the one that's a really sassy, not sassy, but you know what I mean, was talking about that's the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things is taking people for granted. And also, if you've just been a human, there's an innate human ability to stabilize into anything. People who gain a lot of money through the lottery their happiness tends to wane out after a year. You tend to balance into whatever, whether that's weight loss and you need a bigger calorie deficit, whether that's that and that. The human ability to kind of balance out is good, but just not in all areas of life. And so I think that's also a good way to just view someone through the lens of how you first saw them. View your career through the lens of when you first wanted this career. View life through the lens of being independent. It's the first day you're living alone and not the 20,000th day of living alone. Viewing anything and everything through the lens of, for example, when I move, the first couple of months, I love the country. I look for the good parts. And then later I'm like, I've got some creative insults. And that's human nature, but it's not a part that we have to amplify. It's something we should level out. The same way storing fat is human nature. You are the part of the ancestors who had the ability to store fat and had the ability to have their body work off of fat and store it and then use it when you didn't have food, because that's how we survived. But there's a lot of things that are no longer useful. And taking things for granted also is not. I also think you used to not be able to take things for granted because they weren't for granted. It was not granted that you were going to have food every day. It was not granted that someone would come back from war. It was not granted. These things used to not be there. Anyways. And I also think it's an interesting way to view love. I absolutely don't think you need to send every love letter. I don't think you need to send a love letter to everybody. But I do want people who are really nice to have the ability to write love letters, because some poets, or in general, there's people who are really good with words and poets who are players and blah 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 blah, and that's that. But I also want the people who are genuinely in love and might just not be word savvy. I'm not anything else savvy, okay? Don't you worry. I'm bad at everything else. But that they also have this tool, because if I had the ability to turn anyone into however they wanted to look, I would do that. That would be so cool. I can't do that. And it's not safe when people do it through surgery. But you luckily have the ability to do that with words. And I don't want only the players and the da-da-das to have the ability to speak. To have the ability to use words as weapons and as really cool ways to color their existence and their presence. I don't want that to be only for that sector of people. I think that is such a shame that it tends to be, and a lot of poets tend to be players, and I think it's just a shame that not everyone has that skill, but it's teachable. So how do we do this? How do we write a love letter like fairy tales? So this is a series we're about to start. I'm going to introduce it, and then I'm going to tell you some overarching things, and then we'll do fairy tale by fairy tale in the next couple videos. But fairy tales, you're like, why would I want to write in fairy tales? Rom-coms are modern day fairy tales. What is the appeal of a fairy tale? In my personal opinion, it is the same appeal as a rom-com. What is the appeal of a rom-com? It's going to end well. It's interesting, it's engaging, it's not boring. A fairy tale's not boring, nothing. Things are happening. But you are secured a happy ending, which is like the fantasy of life. Your life should not be boring, but you are secured a happy ending. It is calming because you know it's going to end well, so you're not watching it being stressed. Will the prince end up with the princess? No, like you're like, oh, they'll end up together. Oh, they'll fix this thing. But it's fun to just be engaged without stress. Engagement without stress is basically the mystique of fairy tales, in my opinion. There's also, I heard from someone, so the source is not super precise, but it rings true. I do think it's true. A kid's favorite fairy tale is associated to something really, really deep. If one girl's favorite fairy tale is Sleeping Beauty, where she may be isolated, one girl's favorite fairy tale is this, then that. A is B, B is not A. Just because it's her favorite fairy tale does not mean you have to be Freud and be like, so how was your childhood? No, please don't. But usually, depth is not a monolith. It can be depth like this, or it can be depth to the ground. That's interesting, I find, that depth is not like, oh, one level of depth. There's layers to depth. But the reason can be quite deep, or a little bit deep, or just have a little bit of meaning. But knowing her favorite fairy tale, I think is quite convenient. So then you could write like that character. I don't know anyone whose favorite fairy tale, they hate the protagonist, or they hate the main two characters. You usually like both. You usually like the prince and the princess, or whatever way that pans out in the fairy tale. And so being able to go that deep, I think is really, really cool and such an interesting tool. Also, it is not odd. It's not an odd question to ask of being like, oh, what was your favorite fairy tale as a kid? Whereas other love letter questions might be a little odd. Oh, if you were a number, what number would you be? They're like, I don't know. What about you? So, I'll give you 3 points and 3 things I think you should do. First, seeing. Every fairy tale and rom-com, more fairy tales than rom-coms though, but I'm going to use them interchangeably because they're basically adult fairy tales, is the moment he saw her and everything else disappeared. The moment he saw her, and you'll even have like real life examples of that. I think Matthew, I'm so bad at pronouncing names, Matthew McConaughey, there we go, I did it. When he first saw his wife, that also was like a huge thing. And in general, when people talk about the first time they saw someone, they like love at first sight. I don't believe in it, but for the purpose of this, you don't have to be in love, but you do have an impression usually of someone when you first see them. And explaining your thoughts. If you've talked to women, most likely you've at least once heard the question, if not 1,000 times. What are you thinking? It's just a question. It's really, I think it's so cool and interesting to hear what people think. Anyways, but if she then gets an insight to what you thought before she even talked to you, I think that is a really, really cute thing. It's also very fairy tale-esque. If you want to go overboard, you can figure out how to make paper look old. If you put like coffee on it, look it up specifically how to do that. But if you make it look like old paper, and if you like roll it up like it's really old and you put, what is it called? Candle, and then a stamp. Oh my God, death. Okay, so that would be really cool. But to describe what you thought when you first see her. First of all, if you're new to this channel or new to love letters, the rule is you cannot lie. 2 reasons. Except the obvious one, of course, is like it's not good. It's not morally good, but absolutely. But also in practicality, if you lie once, it is human nature to think you always lied. And people know themselves. So if you say, oh, you're such an optimist, and she's like, bitch, I'm a pessimist. Everything else you say, she's not gonna take in the same way. That's why I think people like an honest insult better than like a lie compliment. Saying to a pessimist, you're an optimist, or to an optimist, a pessimist, they don't really take it as a compliment. Whereas you'll see sometimes people banter, and the best banter or the best like insults are the ones that are true. They're not meant hurtfully, but they are coming from a place of like seeing someone. They're like small things. Someone always goes to sleep at a certain time, and oh, I finally have an example for this. So I think Dominique is the name. I mean, I don't remember how to. Names is not my forte, okay? And her husband was describing that she always has to go to sleep at that time, and they have like a ritual of like, I don't know, he gives her a hug, and then he does this, and then he does that, and then they go to sleep. And then he explained it, and he's like, oh, and then I sneak out to go to the living room to like still watch something, but I want to be there for that moment. And he's kind of like a little bit like, again, it's not huge insults. I'm not like, you suck. This is not the way you should go about it. But he's making little digs. It's not huge digs. It's funny. She's laughing because she's being seen. Because she's being seen. Whereas if he would say something crazy where that's not her, she'd be like, what? Anyways, leaving that example aside, but that was a really good example I saw where that was a thing. And I think in general, that's how it works. Anyways, so the first time you see them, what you thought, if it was one sentence, have it be one sentence. If it was 10 sentences, have it be 10 sentences. But do not over-exaggerate or lie. It's not useful, it's not helpful, and it discredits you. The same way someone that always says yes to everything, you're like, do you even want to do this? People don't like yes people. People don't like people pleasers because it feels disingenuous, and it feels like now I have to understand if you actually want to do this because you won't tell me kind of vibe. Second thing, the first time you spoke, what was your impression? Did you have a lot of fun? Did you laugh a lot? Did you think she was intelligent? Now can also be the point when you make small little digs is not the right word. Observations. Did she twiddle with her arm? Did she have a bracelet that she was constantly moving? What little things, if you were like completely present, another huge through line through love letters, if you were like completely present on her, what were the little things? Now, don't make it an essay, okay? You don't need to be like, and then you moved your hand 2 centimeters to the right every 3.5 seconds. No, like no, please don't do that. But if there's like something with the bracelet, or if she's someone who moves her foot a lot when she's nervous, especially like 1 or 2 nervous ticks can be cute. If one of her nervous ticks is chewing her nails, please maybe don't point it out unless you would like her to change it. Then I guess you could point it out in a kind of like cute-ish way of saying, oh, I just hope you keep your nails because they're about to be chewed off. I wouldn't. But if you are going to approach it, I think saying it in a concerned, cutesy way in a love letter probably works best. That's the interesting thing about hard conversations. There is no easy way to make them easy. They're hard by default, so maybe that helps. Anyways, number 3. All the times you fell in love. Now the rules for love letters. There's not as many as I'm making you believe. These are just overarching rules. It has to be a love letter. You can. Look, I'm not the police. I'm not gonna like show up at your house and be like, you did not write a like letter. How dare you? But I would advise you don't write a like letter. You can write a like paragraph. You can write a like poem. You can always translate these love letter ideas to poems. I just wouldn't write a love letter for someone you like. It's just not something I personally would think is advisable. Anyways, but all the times you fell in love, the small things of like, oh, I fell in love with your laugh. I fell in love with this. I fell in love with how the way you treat strangers. I fell in love with the way you engage with people. I fell in love, and you just list the things. Now don't go overboard. Too much and too little is the same disease. I like that sentence. Too much and too little is the same disease. Once I have an editor, I'm gonna have someone put things here and blah blah blah, but I don't have one, so this is a sentence just exists for the now. But too much and too little is the same disease. Don't go over the top, don't go under the top, don't exaggerate, but don't minimize. People like the truth. And the people who don't like the truth, I don't know, I don't have any advice for you. Oh yeah, so that was cleared. I hope you get to have fun writing this. If you want, you can leave the love letter in the comments and I can give you some notes on it. And yeah, I'm really excited. I would love, this is not necessary obviously, if you do write a love letter and you do give it to her and you can somehow film her reaction and tag me on TikTok, that would be so cool. It's not necessary, but if I once do get to see that, oh, that would be so cute. But not necessary, okay? Write the love letter. If you don't want to film it, please don't. If she doesn't want to be filmed, please don't. If she doesn't want it posted, please don't. This is, you know, if it happens, it happens, which would be very cute. But if not, obviously. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you think you like reading, that's the way I wanted to put that sentence. Check out my first poetry book, my second poetry book, and my fiction book. These are all kind of different landscapes of ideas. The first one is with a lot of questions. Maybe you want to discover yourself. It was not written with that intention, but of the nature of the age I was in when I wrote that book, that's kind of how I would encapsulate it. The second poetry book is a lot about discovery and statements and observations, and the first fiction book is the two best friends that someone who's going through a hard time in dating could maybe use in the two main characters. So if you do have a single friend and you're like, I feel like they need a friend, and I am not single, so I need them to have some friend of the sort that would help them through this a little bit, or just not help them through this, just understand where they're coming from, then maybe give them that. Thanks for watching.